Sir, let's take a step back before we dive into the budget issue here. We're stepping into the Burr months. How has the year-to-date occupancy been in our hotels, and what can be expected now as holiday season approaches?
Well, the year-to-date occupancy rate is in the area of 60 to 80%. So it will vary according to the location of the hotel, and of course, it will also depend on how aggressive the marketing and promotions initiatives for a particular property is. But the turnaround point that we saw was in April this year when the government decided to remove all restrictions for fully vaccinated inbound passengers. So we're seeing a very good occupancy, and historically, the last quarter of the year is always, that's the final push, where we get very good occupancy coming from foreigners, from long-haul destinations, coming for the winter months, and also the strong demand coming from the locals and balikbayan, especially towards December.
Sir, you mentioned 60 to 80% occupancy rate. How does this compare to pre-pandemic levels, sir? And of course, how much hotels are fully operational compared to those that had closed during the pandemic?
We look at two performance indicators when we want to assess the hotels. First is the occupancy rate, and as I mentioned, we're looking at 60 to 80%. Pre-pandemic, it will probably be in the 70 to 85%. But we're also looking at the revenue, how much we charge per room. And obviously, we are still far from 2019 levels. But I think the good thing is that we're seeing recovery. The demand is being driven principally by the domestic market, staycation in particular.
Sir, what about the profitability? Is there any indication that we are approaching the levels of profitability? You mentioned that the revenues are still not there. How far along are we, and what's your expectation? How long is it going to take to get back to those levels?
Well, maybe to provide some bit of a perspective. Before the pandemic, we were generating 8.2 million foreign visitors, and there were about 110 million domestic trips. So you can just imagine the volume that the hotels were getting from this huge movement of foreign and domestic travelers. In the latest report of the DOT, they mentioned that for the first 8 months of the year, we're doing about 1.3 million. So we're still a long way off the 8.2 million. As far as domestic, for last year, I think we generated 37 million domestic trips. There are no figures yet for 2022.
Okay.
But I think what's important is that the hotels are doing very well. We've seen the worst. I think what's important is to continue to be aggressive in our marketing and promotions. As to your question on the recovery, in my opinion, it will probably take another year and a half before we go back to 2019 levels.
Sir, where are the risks tilted now? Because there's still, of course, revenge travel and people having a backlog in terms of bookings, but at the same time, inflation really eating into consumers' pockets. Are people going to stop spending on travel yet again? Or are you seeing, like you mentioned, that the worst is over and you're pretty confident na tuloy-tuloy na to?
Surprisingly, and this is a bit of a good news, the price has not really been an issue, even for Filipino travelers. Now, from the reports that we've been getting from our member hotels, they don't really care too much about the price. What's important is that first, we assure them of the safety while in the hotel premises. And then second is that we provide a better travel experience for them. So many of the hotels are being innovative, they're being creative. Some of the hotels, for example, are offering pet-friendly rooms. Some of them are offering healthy options in their restaurants or outlets. So we're seeing a lot of creativity. And this has created a lot of additional revenue stream for our hotels.
What are the trends now post-pandemic? Are people traveling? You mentioned domestic travel is pulling its weight. Are people doing, so Bloomberg calls it comfort travel, going to places that they like and frequently? Are there new areas that suddenly, are not the Boracay's, but other small areas that people are frequenting now, especially since the focus is probably less on Chinese tourists that used to pull in the weight and now more on domestic people?
what we're seeing across the different travel segments, so whether you're leisure, whether you're in the MICE business, is the growing preference for outdoor activities. So even the
Okay.
restaurants are now offering more al fresco options. For those who are organizing parties or special events, we're seeing a shift towards the outdoor type. In terms of the destinations, of course, the beach destinations, the resort destinations will continue to be a very strong draw among domestic and foreign travelers. I think the other thing that we'd like to mention is that there's growing awareness and appreciation of sustainability or green initiatives. So we're going to see a lot of travelers who will be looking at sustainability practices in hotels, resorts, and other accommodation facilities while they're staying.
Sir, which segments are catching up faster? The luxury or the budget travel or the business travel?
Well, it's quite balanced. But in the case of the Philippines, that's as I mentioned, what's really drawing the demand is the domestic market. And again, the advantage of the Philippines is that we have a very large domestic tourism base. And that's the reason we were able to generate 110 million domestic trips in 2019. As far as business travel is concerned, from the studies that we have reviewed, what is important is for us to remove the protocols to make it as easy as possible, because airfare will probably not be as much of a factor for business travelers. But what came out in our interviews is the need to further ease the restrictions, especially when entering our borders.
Okay, sir, let's shift the discussion to the budget. This BBM guest program, is this something that you expect to be a real boost?
We have not seen the details of this particular program, but on the part of the Philippine Hotel Owners Association, any program that will position the Philippines very strongly, very competitively to the foreign market is obviously welcome. I think it's important for us to also take note that our neighbors are moving very, very fast. In fact, some of them opened their borders ahead of us. So we really have to make sure that we remain competitive across all operating areas, whether it's in service or facilities or even the flight connection. I think overall, what's important is for our association, Philippine Hotel Owners Association, to support the initiatives of the Department of Tourism.